process and this investigation process, even in different municipalities, but very much the same kind of thing. So I think we have a lot to share with each other. So I hope we can do that tonight. Wayne, good to see you.
Hi. Nice to see everybody. Nice to see you, Lester.
Yeah.
I guess we've never spoken face to face, really.
No, this is our first time, I think. Yeah.
Great to see you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. It's
Or
good
Zoom
to
to Zoom there, Wayne.
Zoom to Zoom. That'll have to do for now. Do we know how many people are going to be able to make it tonight?
I didn't get anybody that said they weren't making it.
Okay.
So I don't want to say that they're all coming, but nobody said that, hey, I won't be able to be there. Actually,
One person.
yeah, I stand corrected. Somebody did say,
She had a typo in her message. She said, I'll be vomiting that
Yeah.
night. Remember?
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
oh, that was Step Ann, right? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she got a lot of blowback for that one.
It's like I sent one of these Zoom invites one time to, because I'm president of Chiefs Association for Ulster County. I sent this email and a Zoom invite that I've sent to one of you guys before to them. They let me, they rattled me a little bit after that. They're like, oh, when can we join? And everything like that. So I'm like, sorry, it was under the wrong group.
Yeah.
Wrong heading.
So Lester, I think Chief Berardi said that you and he have had some interaction on the county and some of the county conversation. Or?
Exactly. We were both on the county reform, police reform committees, commission. They called it a commission. It's been an amazing learning experience, and each approach is slightly different. But that's okay. I think that, as I was saying earlier, I think all of us were learning as we go, as we went on this one. And I think it was an important and valuable exercise for all of us to go through.
Was that county commission also part of what was mandated by the governor, or that's something separate?
It was all part of the same 203 mandate.
How many committee members were total on that then, Lester? I lost count there.
Something like 12 to 15, somewhere around there, I think. Yeah.
Hello, Stuart.
Howdy.
Howdy.
Hey, Andy.
Good evening.
That's your Alfred Hitchcock?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
For those that remember the early days of television. Da-dum, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, ba-dum, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da.
I'm sorry to say I am old enough to remember all of that.
Yeah. No. They were good times. Today is better though.
Well, then you had just a few choices, whatever was on the network, whatever was showing on the network at that moment,
right?
As opposed to watching anything you want anytime.
Yep.
And I do think that was better. Actually, it was better.
Yeah.
That's how I remember it anyway.
It seems better. We were younger, right?
Right now, I'm watching Little Big Man, and Custer is just about to go down into the valley of the Little Big Man and get his.
Good movie.
Yeah.
So Lester, you were saying that you're hoping tonight will be more of a kind of a give and take, back and forth.
I have a kind of a few overview comments, hopefully that will stimulate conversation, and then we'll see where it goes.
Okay.
I just think that I'm a big believer in collective wisdom, and I think that all of us having gone through this, I think we all have something to bring and some some light to shed
Mhm.
on, I think, important issue for all of us. So I
Better
hope you
light
guys.
than heat.
Well, you know what? I don't mind a little heat too. It's okay with me. Keeps me awake.
This committee, I think over the time we've been working together, which is, how many months is it that we've been meeting? When did we start? In March or April last year?
Started the end of August, didn't we?
Oh, end of August. Okay.
Oh,
Just
Cheryl, yeah,
feels like it
Cheryl's
was
got the hand
Monday.
signal going there.
6 months? 6 months. Seems like more.
It was like throwing signs there or something like that.
Oh, no. It started in August.
August, okay.
It was August, yeah.
Because we were still meeting sort of in person, spread out, but I was already, feeling at that point, this doesn't feel good. So we pretty quickly moved to the Zoom meetings. Yeah.
And the Zoom has been interesting because I've learned to adapt to this because it's real face to face. I mean, we
Mhm.
look people right in the
Right.
eye.
Yep.
It's a lot closer than sitting in a big room around a circle. So,
It is, yeah.
Mhm.
And it's better than being masked.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know what y'all are thinking about tonight. We could wait until who knows when for people to start to join. So what do you think about starting the conversation and bringing people on? Or did you want to wait a few more minutes? What do you think?
Maybe just give it 2 more minutes, and Mr. Gottlieb usually is pretty dedicated, usually here, so hopefully he'll sign on.
I know Dr. Woodley was at the whims of whether there was whether the vaccine was available or not, if he'd be out, heading up getting people vaccinated. So
uh,
he's, going around poking everybody.
oh, you mean he was actually administering the vaccine?
He's an administrator of the people who do
Oh.
it. So of the
see.
administrators, yes.
Mhm, mhm.
I think he heads up that Hudson Valley Medical Group, doesn't he? He's the director of it, I think.
I don't know.
Used to be the Family Practice Center years ago.
Mhm.
Lester, where are you from? You live in Kingston, or?
I live in Kingston.
Okay.
I grew up in a little steel mill town just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Mhm.
And I've lived the life of a nomad. When I was in television, I worked in I guess it's 5 different markets: Charlotte, Atlanta, New York, Boston. Yeah. So those were the markets that I worked in. And then I became the CEO of a yoga and meditation foundation. And we had yoga and meditation centers in 46 countries. So
Wow.
I traveled a lot doing that. And then I became the CEO of an organization called Experience Corps, which is part of AARP Foundation. And we worked with elementary school children who struggled with reading. And we would bring them up to grade level proficiency by the end of the 3rd grade year. And we worked with 30,000 kids a year.
Wow.
In 23 cities across the country. So I did that for 8 years. And then after that, I started to slow down. And I took a job with, I don't know if you know about Kripalu, which is
No.
a yoga
Yeah.
and health
Yeah, sure.
organization up in Lenox, Massachusetts. And while there, decided that that's really where it became clear to me that I really wanted to start serving as a bridge between different organizations and different groups that weren't not necessarily communicating with each other.
What is it called? Kripalu?
Kripalu, Krapa, Kripalu,
Palu.
P-A-L-A-U.
Hey,
Yeah, Kripalu. Yeah. So it's a yoga and health.
Mhm.
It's like a wonderful spa. It's amazing, and it
Wow.
has kind of writers and poets and philosophers and yogis who come and teach there throughout the year, and they
from all over the world.
from all over the world. They have
Yeah.
somewhere on the order of 50 to 100,000 people come through that facility a year. It's quite amazing. It's quite amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. So
It
it's
might
great.
be noted that yoga comes from a root meaning union, as in yoke, union with God. And there are many forms of yoga. The ones that everyone is most familiar with is hatha yoga, which is the physical exercises. But there are Krishna yoga, there's Bhakti yoga, there's Kundalini yoga. I originally came to the area in the early 70s to Rudy's up in Big Indian,
Yeah.
which was a Kundalini yoga
Yeah.
ashram.
Yeah. 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 You know your yoga.
Yeah,
Classically there are 8 limbs of yoga
yeah.
exactly, and the ascendant masters are said to be masters of all 8, which is quite something. Quite something. Yeah.
And the more masterful get, the more truly humble they are.
I had a chance to read the book, Desmond Tutu and Dalai Lama. They did
Yeah, I read it.
that was
Yeah.
quite a book. That was,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and they really exemplify what kind of really accomplished masters do. I mean, the philosophies really come together at some point where there's really no distinction between kind of the ultimate outcomes that they all seek, which is really kind of human truth and development, which is really the goal. Yeah. Wow, I didn't think I'd be talking about yoga tonight.
Remember,
Now medit-
we're in
now
the town of
medit-
Ulster. We're a good group here. We're diverse.
We should probably be doing some meditation and yoga all together too.
Well,
One
don't
of
tempt
the
me.
one of the funniest things I ever saw was a guy, obviously Jewish guy with wire frame glasses, and maybe in his 30s, back around maybe the 80s or 90s, who was in full lotus on a wall on the Woodstock Green with a big sign propped up beneath him that said, "No God, be a yogi." Would it that were it that simple?
Yeah. All right, it's 7:11.
Go.
My machine.
Let's go.
Well, again, everybody, so great to be with you tonight. Chief, Wayne, thank you in particular for inviting me, allowing me to come and chat with your incredible committee. As I was saying earlier, this is something that while we haven't been in the same room together, we've certainly been through a common experience together. And if your process was anything like ours, it was kind of figuring out as you go, and that's really what we did too. And I'll walk you through a little bit of what that process was like for us. I think I've already shared with you my background. The last 2.5 years has really been focused on the Peaceful Guardians Project, which was its original intent was to bring together police officers and youth of color together to really begin to have a conversation to build a level of trust and communication between them. And then as things happened, I was invited to start working with the Kingston Police Department, particularly in the area of wellness. I don't know if you guys know it, but nationally, police officers live 10 years less than the average American, which is average lifespan is 78. Theirs is 68. because of the level of stress that happens through the job. So we wanted to really find ways to help minimize or reduce that level of stress for the officers. And on the other side, when we were working with the kids, it was really about helping them to find what was important for them in their life. It was about developing social and emotional skills, things like team building and resilience and agency and self-care and self-love. So what was interesting is that we were working with each group separately, and then we'd bring them together. And what was also interesting is that many of the principles that we would be teaching to the police officers, we'd also be teaching to the kids. So what happened is that when they came together, they had a common language that they really could use to really talk about kind of their hopes and their concerns. And it was, I would, frankly, I've just been thrilled with the outcomes. And we got great feedback from both officers and kids and teachers through the process. Of course, with COVID, we had to suspend the person-to-person, and with the challenges in the education system, doing it online just was not feasible because they were having trouble even getting kids to come to class online. Mm-hmm. So we've suspended it, and hopefully one day we'll be able to resume it. But right now, the work that obviously has been occupying my time has been the work of our task force around public safety and community relations. And we just completed our document. The 22nd of January, it was submitted to the Common Council then, and now it's going through the process of what they'll review, what they'll keep, what they won't keep. So very much like I'm sure yours is, your legislative body will be making decisions about what will they adopt and what they won't adopt. So that's kind of where I am. As I said earlier, I hope we can just have a conversation tonight because I think we have a lot in common and I think we have a lot to share with each other. Let me start with where our task force landed. Some of the things that really kind of loomed large through our investigation of the process. One of the big ones was that our citizens are grossly uninformed about what is the process and the relationship between police and the community. What are their rights? Many citizens don't know what their rights are, what they can say, what they can't say, when they should allow a search to happen, when they shouldn't allow a search to happen if they're stopped. So a lot of things like that really became clear that a significant education process is really important. And that's particularly important because of the effects of social media, that we don't live in a isolated fishbowl, whether it's Ulster County, the town of Ulster, or Kingston. We are bombarded by social media 24/7. And I don't need to tell you, some of the information is accurate and a lot of it is not. And if that's what people are taking in, that's what we're having to counteract. And the hard part of all of that, as we've discovered in our work, is that while it may not be fair, many people in our community are judging the police officers and judging communities, by the way. It goes both ways, by what they see on social media. You know, if there's a riot in Minneapolis, then the first impulse is that going to happen here? And what are we going to do if and when that happens here? Or, could a George Floyd happen here? And what are we going to do about it? And, so it is, again, whether you consider it fair or unfair,
It's real.
it's real. And institutions, whether it's city government, whether it's the police department, whether it's community organizations, really have to work 3 times as hard to get the accurate information out to the community because of all of the misinformation and flood of information that all of our citizens are having. So that was really an eye-opening and an important piece.
One of the things I've said strongly, that it seems to me that the town needs a small PR public relations officer to try to keep their pulse on the community, to try to control the message, to try to get out in front of the stampede and to redirect it. That so much of what goes down, we have cop shows, we have movies, and people think that that's reality. When I was in computers, one of the things that was a byword was perception is reality, appearance is reality. It ain't fair, but that's what goes down.
Yeah.
And you need somebody to present the message that you think is fair and balanced to the community at large, to try to listen to the community at large and have a sense, almost like a weatherman, to have forecast ahead about what's coming down, or disaster handling in that sense. It's a difference between tactics and strategy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you don't have strategy, what you do is ending up everything is tactics. Tactics is what you do with your hands, whereas strategy is what you do with your brain to try and arrange the field of contention so that everybody wins. Whereas tactics is what you do at the last second when it's jumping down your throat. Okay, I'll shut up for a while.
Well said, though. I think that you're right that often perception is reality, and how it is presented is critically important. And the other, yes, it's Cheryl, right?
Cheryl, yes.
Yeah, Cheryl.
So I think what I've noticed over the past time is just as Mr. Dean was saying. So we try to get, we try to put out the correct message with this board, and this board makes up our town. We don't have everyone here did not start believing in the same thing. We had a very diverse group of perspectives, and we came together. We've got the facts, but we can spit facts all day. If the crowd is not ready to listen and ready to accept the truth and what is matter of fact, we will never get to that point. We will never get to the point in which Mr. Strong was talking about. And I think it's important that you said, you spoke to the police officers and then you spoke to the community and then you gave them a commonality. And it's like, sometimes I feel like as a minority in this field, I can probably be that liaison. But I can tell you from time and time again, a lot of times I'm met with resistance because when they see me, they see a police officer and they see someone who is, a lot of times I get referred to as like a traitor or something of the sort. When in fact, we sat down, we went through statistics. Sergeant Sapeworth and I went through stats. We went through, Miss Murphy did a ride along and she asked really critical questions. And we brought the facts to the board, and it was the open forum. And we said, yes, I am the number one person that would tell you racism exists. It exists no matter where you go. when you're looking at the numbers, and to say that our police department is specifically racist in this position or in this thing, you have to delve deeper into just what's on the surface. And we presented those facts, and I even got on and I said, you know, these are what lies behind those statistics, and it was still met with resistance. So I guess my question is, how do you balance? Because if you're talking to a group of people, like you said, you're coming here for a conversation. You're not coming from a point of resistance. You're not coming from a point of dissent. But a lot of times, because of the influence of social media and, you know, just what the newspaper says, like the front line of the newspaper, no one really goes deeper into it. And it's like, yeah, I can sit here all day and give you what you want. But if you're ready to come from a point of resistance, no matter what I say, it's not going to be met. So how have you combated that?
Amen, sister. Wow. Yeah. You know, there was this great business leader who was a consultant and a writer and philosopher. His name was Peter Drucker. And Peter Drucker famously said that culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
You know, and what he's saying is that you can spout all the facts that you want. You can have the best laid plans and policies and procedures, you know, in place. And in fact, to be honest with you, we found that in Kingston. I mean, in terms of formal policies and procedures, they were buttoned up beautifully. But culture eats strategy for breakfast. And what that means is that if the majority of people within the culture, whether it's a police department, whether it's a school department, whether it is a business that you run, if they are resistant to the policies and procedures that you have in place, they're going to find ways to get around it because they're not going to want to do it. So the heart of the question for all of us is how do we create a culture? And this is something that I had said to Wayne earlier. How do we create a culture that everybody can buy into? Both the community and the police officers. What does that look like so that it's not one is being kind of mandated, this is what you're going to do, this is how you're going to do it, and that sort of thing. Some of that is necessary because it's really clear, it's really important to create boundaries. But it's also important that you get buy-in into where you want to go. Because if everybody doesn't have the same vision of where you're going, we're going to be pulling each other apart. So that is the hard lesson. And frankly, that's why this process isn't going to be resolved in a month or a year or 5 years. Because if we look at the culture, and again, if you're talking about law enforcement culture, but also you're talking about culture within communities of color, you're talking about long-standing traditions that are so ingrained that it is extraordinarily hard to really bring those two cultures together. And that, frankly, is the work that we are engaged in. Now, having said that, I think it is also important. You said, Cheryl, that you were the one that was speaking and saying, I'm willing to be that bridge. I'm speaking to you now from experience. You cannot be that bridge completely. That if there are not white people who are saying we've got to change, it will not change. Now, I mean, that is the hard truth because of the systemic and unconscious racial bias that does exist. And, you know, we can talk all night about unconscious bias, but it exists. And until a white person stands up and says, This cannot continue, that we have to find a way to ensure that everybody is treated humanely, fairly, and respectfully. And until that is ingrained and is propagated by a critical mass of white people, then, and it's not going to happen because, again, because of the nature of racial bias, there is, and it's more conscious for some than others, but it is there, is that people of color are essentially just trying to protect or to create out of their own interests, rather than what is in the larger interest of the community, which is obviously not true. But in fact, there is a perception that Black people are constantly suing for more rights and more privileges and that sort of thing. And there's this great book called The Sum of Us.
Mhm.
And for many people, there is this perception that it is a zero-sum game, which is if you win, I lose. That if I give you certain rights and privileges, it means that I'm going to lose some. And at the heart and at the core of that is really about power and identity. And when one's identity and power is threatened, one retrenches back to that which is familiar and that which is comfortable. And what we're asking people to do on all sides is to step out of that comfort zone. And it's not easy. It's not easy for folks. So that's just some of this is a really intricate, complicated, world that we're stepping into, and I would hasten to add that we have to step into, because unless we do, we're going to be in the same hole that we're in. Who was it that mentioned the Desmond Tutu, Dalai Lama? Yeah, there is this great phrase that Archbishop Desmond Tutu uses. It's called Ubuntu. And Ubuntu says essentially just the opposite of zero-sum game. And that is that my humanity is tied to your humanity.
Mhm.
I can only succeed if you succeed. And the dark side of that is that the degree to which you oppress me is the degree to which you are oppressing yourself, because we are so interwoven and tied to one another that without that kind of mutual support, we will not survive. And in fact, historians will tell you that because America has not come to terms with what many would call the original sin of slavery, because we are seeking to rationalize that experience, and because we are trying to say that it's in the past and it's not now, we're not dealing effectively with the consequence of what has been slavery for the past 400 years. And again, people a lot smarter than I am have really chronicled it from 1619 to the Revolutionary War, to the Civil War, to Jim Crow, to housing and job discrimination, to this moment. So, I mean, there is a clear line that exists. But because it has been so subtle and because it is so ingrained and endemic in the systems that we have, we often don't even see it. It's so much a part of how we do business.
Mhm.
I was reading a book by Isabel Wilkerson. The book is called Caste. And in the book, she says that there's a caste system in the United States that is based purely on color. that, you know, on your features and your color. And she met an African poet in London who said to her, you know, we don't have race in Africa. And
You have
Isabel looked at her
tribes.
like she had three heads. She said, what do you mean you don't have race? She said, we have tribes,
Yes.
we have countries, we have languages that distinguish us, but we don't have race. The only place where race comes up is either in the United States or in Europe. But in Africa, there's no such thing as race. We are just seen as people with different languages and different tribes and different, and when you look at even, and that's why it's so subtle, to even talk about race is a racial issue, you know, because we're the only ones talking about it. Most of the country doesn't even have a clue of what that means. But because we have predicated an entire social system on someone's pigment, the level of melatonin that they have in their skin, it's incredible. And, you know, in the report that I wrote for the Common Council, I said that we are having a, what did I call it? Oh, not Galileo, the person who, the scientist who
Copernicus.
Copernicus, thank you. That we were having a Copernicus moment in the sense that Copernicus discovered that the earth revolves around the sun, not that the sun revolves around the earth. And he had all of the scientific proof to demonstrate that. But because we were so conditioned to believe that the sun revolves around the earth, he was almost excommunicated because people just could not believe it. And in the same way, while we have the data that tells us that really the only difference between a black person and a white person is melanin, that we have assigned all of these other qualities and attributes to the other. And because of that, we just have a very difficult time believing and understanding that we really are the same. But in effect, that's what Tutu is trying to tell us, is that we're really the same. And then unless and until we come to that understanding, we're always going to be at odds with one another.
Well, there are clearly forces within American power structure and all that that are served by keeping white and black separate or at one another's throats. So it's not just happening. I mean, it's being fed all the time, right? It serves a purpose to keep us at each other.
Largely an economic purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Well, let's not get into the capitalism thing.
Okay. All right.
And exploitation. I grew up in the South and in a liberal family, and the thing I see is that the prejudice exists are chains, and these chains are invisible, but they are handed down. They are chrome plated. They are glorified and passed on to the children so that they can wear chains too. And we will not. I was just reading a piece recently about a woman who's the only white counselor on a town board, and the pushback she gets. These people are afraid, and they are afraid because the matter of being unbiased and not making people others opens everything up. It makes it creative. It makes it unhierarchical, untraditional, and it scares the hell out of them.
Mhm.
And it's only when we take everyone as equals and with their own special contributions that we can then have the creative synergism. The South will never rise again until it gives up on rising again and just opens to its potential, as it is with all of its people.
Yeah, that's. I
So
hear it. Yeah.
what do we say to, and I've seen it, and I mean, a lot of times I haven't addressed it, but I see, especially with like our younger guys, you know, when we bring up the conversation, and a lot of them will come to me, or we'll just engage in conversation about racism and implicit bias and how we were raised differently and our cultures and those type of things. And we have some, not all of them, because some of them will honestly say, I'm not comfortable talking about it. But there are a lot of guys who are willing to engage in those uncomfortable conversations and say, well, how can I get better? Or what do I do better? Or like you said, Mr. Strunks, I've heard a lot of the guys say, I just see people. Like I don't see white, I don't see black. And even though like we know that there are biases that exist, we know that to be true. But when they say, you know, I just see people, and I don't want to ever be that cop, or I don't want to ever be that person, and I was raised around African Americans all my life, my best friends, and this is the culture I grew up in. And then when they go out there, it's constantly, you're a racist, you're a racist, you're a racist. All these new trainings are being revolved around the fact that these officers have these biases that they go out and they treat people differently because of the color of their skin. And I literally sit and I watch some of the guys who are like, I like, why am I being accused? You know, why am I just being like that person that's like, I'm a racist? And it's like, I genuinely help everyone, or I genuinely treat everyone the same. And again, and I know I'm not the liaison, but I feel like we have we have a close-knit police department where they can feel freely to be like, Cheryl, does this seem weird, or how can I change this? And I'm just like, I don't have answers for them, because they do see, for the most part, everyone the same, and it's society's telling them otherwise.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting dilemma, and my experience is that we don't see everybody the same. And when we say that, it's a diversionary tactic. I mean, to say that you don't see that the largest organ on my body you don't see it, is just not true. I mean, children who are 3 and 4 years old notice that your color is different from their color. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I would suggest that saying that I don't see color doesn't honor who I am, because this is my color. But to say I see your color and it's fine, and I also see your humanity in addition to your color, is a very different story than I really don't see who you are. And I know that I know it's well-intentioned, I guess is what I'm saying to you, Cheryl. I know it's well-intentioned, and it's a blocking mechanism to really get at the core of where the problem might be. Is that making any sense to you?
I mean, if in fact there is a problem.
Okay.
Yeah. If in fact there actually is a problem, you know, like I understand what you're saying, and I've had multiple conversations about like when people say I don't see color, but you and I have read books and gone to seminars and understood the differences. Someone who's freshly out of the academy, who really doesn't have that much cultural experience, I should say, when they say, and like you said, there's no malintent there. It's just, I don't see color, meaning I see everyone the same. Right. And I have said that, no, you should see color, and you should understand that maybe the way this person acts is different, because we go off of patterns as police officers, you know? But like that's the thing. It's like sometimes I think that we perceive a problem that isn't actually there in law enforcement.
Amen. Exactly. Exactly
Okay.
right. You're
Right.
total. I think you're totally right on that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely. And that's the problem of our system, is that we've been so indoctrinated that we see issues that aren't necessarily there.
Mhm.
Totally right. I totally
Well, in
right.
respect to that too, I think it would be counterproductive. We talk about race. Obviously, we talk about, police officers are more biased or racist towards people of color, and society's demanding us to bring that, either the truth, to prove that to be true or prove that to be false. And suggestions have been made to the fact is, we want officers to now identify everybody by race, right? Document every time they make a stop, either as a vehicle or on a field interview, by what race was the person you stopped. Isn't that counterproductive to what we're trying to perceive as the fact is only United States is the only one that recognizes race?
I would say that it's necessary right now, Chief, because right now, and this came up in our group as well. There were complaints that were issued against police officers, but because there was no ticket given, and because there was no arrest made, there's no documentation of that. So literally, an officer could come up to a black person and say, "What the hell are you doing here? This isn't your neighborhood. You don't belong here, and I don't want to see you here anymore." And tell him to get out of here. Now, serious trauma has happened, but that will never be recorded because there was no ticket given, there was no arrest made. It was just a form of intimidation that is going to sit with that individual probably for the rest of their lives. So to be able to say, I met with 18 different people, 5 of them were black, and here's the engagement. I know it's a lot of paperwork. And yet we have to figure out a way, and I want to ask you a question in a minute. We have to figure out a way to ensure that the treatment and the engagement that we have with all of our citizens is consistent. Consistent, whether they live in the most well-heeled neighborhood or whether they live where junkies live. That treatment has to be consistent. So the question is, how do we get to that? And that's what I wanted to ask you, Chief, is that if you had a magic wand to wave, maybe it's already happening, how would and should the department run? What does it look like for you?
Currently, or where I see it in the future?
Where you think it should be?
Well, the fact is, as I think, and I've been questioned quite a few times, and I said this before everybody joined on, was the fact is, the demographics of the town of Ulster are limited to the fact is there's only a small population of people of color. I was asked, I think last year or maybe a year and a half ago, just because of that, does that mean I don't look for officers to more be meet the demographics of the town? Do I look for officers, females, people of color, Hispanic people to hire? And it's not true, because our community is different to the fact is we have a large transient population. And my job is not just to serve the residents, but obviously serve the people that travel through this town. And so when I look to hire, I don't necessarily look to hire people like me. And I say it all the time, and people quote me on it, is I don't need a bunch of people like me. I need a bunch of people like Andy Seyfarth or Cheryl Benjamins or Javier Casanedas, or, because I want to look to my left and look to my right and be able to pick the best person for the job at that moment. But with that respect, it is still hard, because of the fact is sometimes to get the diversity you want, those might not be the best people for the job.
Right.
And yes, that goes back to the fact is, police got to do a better job of engaging the community, to make people of color more interested in applying, to maybe make the profession look more appealing. But also society right now is really making the profession as a whole not look very appealing to any young person. Be like, why would I engage in a profession where right now majority of the society dislikes you? You're being scrutinized for everything you do, and you don't really make a whole lot of money, generally speaking, for what you go through, and you're questioned at everything you do. So I mean, that's the problem too. Like, how do we, society wants us to diversify. They want us to engage the community, but they also make it harder because, like you said, social media earlier on, social media is selling the picture that this profession is not what you should be doing right now.
Yeah.
So it's
Well,
like, I mean, I'm not saying we're not used to hard jobs, but we got a steep incline to get up to with everything against us at this point.
no question. No question.
You know,
And I would say,
I
Chief,
kind of rambled on about some
no, it was great. It was great,
Yeah.
actually. I would, just a discussion here.
Yeah.
Isn't it true though that even diversity is only the first step? In other words, for me, it's really how those individuals treat me. I got to tell you that I've been treated enormously bad by black cops, who were seeking to prove to their white brothers that they can be as tough on black people as anybody. So the fact that they're black doesn't necessarily mean that they are sensitive and open and respectful. It doesn't mean that. So even they need to have clear guidelines as to how people need to be treated. And for you, I think you have a harder job because you only have 3%. And because you live in a place where the majority of white people are going to be just fine with what you do. Because my guess is that you have a fairly routine way of engaging them that is pretty good, that is pretty respectful. So it means that for you, you've got to work twice as hard because you don't have as much engagement with black people as they do in Kingston or as they do in in New York City. You just don't have that. So it's even harder for you, I think, than it is for those. Does that make sense?
I mean, I think sorry, Clayton, I apologize. I think it's generally like you said too. It's a buy-in. It has a lot to do with what you kind of preach from the top. And yes, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that no matter how much I diversify the police department, it's if I preach the culture of hatred, or even if I preach the color of dirty police cars, like if I say I don't care, don't wash your police cars,
it all starts with you.
Times guys aren't going to wash their police cars.
Absolutely, it all starts with you. No question. No question. I agree.
One of the things I was wondering, we've spent the last 6 or 7 months doing a lot of analysis and looking under carpets and looking for problems. And I'm wondering when we can turn the corner, and what experiences do you have in fertilizing what's working well, to identify what things in our culture, like what is it that worked well within this committee? What is working well? Because if we continue to focus on what's wrong, I think we're going to continue to have a problem. If we can be aware, we've now are aware. When is there a point where we can say, I'm aware of what's wrong, but I now want to focus on fertilizing the grass rather than putting weed killer out?
Yeah.
Because I've been told that if you want to keep the weeds out of your yard, you keep the grass strong. So how do we find and identify best practices that that are that are understanding of racial bias, that are understanding of social ignorance, but are starting to work to build up a culture that is better? And do we know that?
Yeah,
What?
it's beautiful, Clayton. Absolutely. Mother Teresa said it. She said, you know, when during the Vietnam War, people were saying, "So why don't you come out against the war?" She said, "Don't ask me what I'm against. Ask me what I'm for. Ask me for what I'm trying to create, rather than just push against." And in the same way, I think it's important that that we that we really first of all get clear about where do we want to go and what do we want to look like, both as a town and as a police department. Because unless we have a vision for where we want to go, we won't get there. We'll just kind of stumble through. But I think it's really critically important that we create a vision of what we want our department to look like, and then we work toward it. I mean, it's really that simple. And because one of the things that we said earlier is that we need buy-in. You know that culture eats strategy. So that unless our community and our police department have a vision of how we want to be as a community, then we have no direction. So first and foremost, we need to set a direction. We need to have that. Then we have something to build toward and work toward. Argue with me if you disagree, but that's my 2 cents. Ellen, Eileen, is it Eileen? You're muted. You're muted, Eileen. Yeah. You're muted again. You're still muted. There you go. There you go.
I'm good now?
You're good.
Mhm.
Okay, good. Yes, nice to meet you. Thanks so much for, presenting us with such a inviting way of looking at such tender subjects. Feels very easy, and I think it helps keep us open. And I think the vision is a little bit like, where you started, which was really the wellness of this, very vital and, important service that the police department gives to us. And, you can hear in the tone of the policemen when they speak that no one understands, what they're really going through. And I think that was my education, throughout this reform panel, was to see up close and personal, how it really feels for these police officers to be unappreciated.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think simply to begin to have the conversation about that sentence, that the whole community is wanting us to do more and they do not understand what it is that we're doing. That to me is where the conversation needs to start.
Yeah.
And then, you begin to have a vision of a different kind of brotherhood with the way the police consider themselves, a different kind of family, a family still who takes each other's backs and also checks in with each other's insides.
Yeah. Hear, 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 hear. I think that one of the most important things that I did in the last 2 years was let the police officers know that first and foremost I cared about them.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't that you got to do this and you got to do that and you're all wrong. It's we got to take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
That your health, your safety is hugely important in this equation. And unless we can do that, then none of this other stuff makes sense. Because if you're out there every minute of your life just taking taking hits and nobody's seeing or understanding the critical nature of the work that you do, then it's a useless exercise. And once we were able to get to a level of trust there, then we were able to talk about, what was happening in the Black community or in at-risk communities. And there was, it wasn't about everything being their fault, because it isn't. So we were able to find a common ground of trust, and once we were able to do that, then we were able to really begin. I mean, and they were just so beautiful with these young kids. Once they felt like somebody cared about them, then they had the space to begin to care about those kids. So, it's got to work both ways, in my view, or it won't work. Wayne.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. On the question of trust, I think there's two levels. One is with the individual officer and how they behave, how they handle their responsibilities, how they interact with the community, everyone in the community. And that's very personal. And I feel just from the officers that I've met through this committee, I feel good about the people who are out there on the street. But the place where I think it breaks down, it seems to me, and what we've seen so powerfully this year with the Black Lives Matter movement, is it's not so much about the behavior of individual officers, but it's about the way they're not held accountable by the larger structure, the way they pull together and corroborate their stories, and don't put out videotape in a timely manner. So there's this sense of betrayal, not necessarily by the individual officer who may have overstepped their authority or broken procedure or rules, but the response, the anger seems to come from the community mostly, and I get that, is that we've seen some of these horrendous situations come down, often on videotape, and nobody pays a price for it. Nobody's held to account. And that's where I see a lot of the frustration and anger coming from. So to me, that's something that is not just about individual police officers' behavior, but it's about how does the criminal justice system and how does the police department deal with situations in which someone's rights have clearly been violated.
Yeah, no question. And that's both the advantage and the disadvantage of national media, is that it's so powerful. And what I had to come to grips with, seeing all of this craziness across the country, but I got to look at Kingston. I just got to look at Kingston. What is it that I can do here that is really going to move the dime? Because, and believe me, it doesn't mean that we can't and shouldn't push against kind of institutional issues that are happening. We absolutely should. But my charge, especially in the work that we were doing, my charge was Kingston. Mm-hmm. And what is it that I can do here that is going to make the relationship between police and community at least a little more humane than it's been? Mm-hmm. So I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I think and in fact, that's, if I dwell too long on that, all I'm going to do is get pissed off.
Right. We're all working in the light of that. In other words, if those things hadn't happened, we wouldn't have this committee.
Well, that's true for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not true for me, in the sense that I've had to deal all my life with this issue. So this issue has been my life. And I think it is at a level and at a place where, and forgive me, but I think white people are beginning to understand the seriousness of what this level of oppression has been like. Mm-hmm. So I don't disagree with that either. I think that there is a level of momentum that is picking up. And while there is something that we can do nationally, I think we can do more locally. And I think that the work that this committee is doing can have dramatic influence on how the town of Ulster engages with not only its citizens, but also with those who pass through the town of Ulster, just like in Kingston. And I think that's really where I think we can make a huge difference.
Mr. Strong, do you think that collaboratively there's any efforts? So, you know, like how they always say, you heal from within. And do you think there's any efforts to actually bridge the gap within communities before bridging it with police officers? And I'm not saying that definitely a gap needs to be bridged between police officers and communities, but to bridge communities of color within themselves. Are you and I say that because one of the comments you made earlier, and I know you didn't mean it maliciously, but like you said, you know, Black officers, just because they're Black, they're not, doesn't mean that they're not the meanest or whatever, you know, like, and then you followed by saying that a lot of times when Black officers are mean is to prove it to their white counterparts. And so that gave me the vision, like, you know what, sometimes we're so quick to put our own down or so quick to label our own, and we have to work as a community of color first and help each other grow before we can try to change everybody else. And I don't know if you agree with me, but, you know, like naturally, a lot of times, and I've had this happen, and why I'm bringing it to light is because, you know, a lot of times people say, oh, you have to, when I was on the road, oh, you have to show your, you know, the white man that you're tough. And no, maybe I just watched someone jump off the bridge, so I was a little upset. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean, and I'm human. And so that's actually insulting when you say that I'm trying to prove my point, because a lot of the guys here are junior to me and they actually look up to me as opposed to me having to prove myself to them. So that just brought me back to the fact that I think a lot of times, in order to really successfully help bridge that gap, we have to get out of that mentality that and I'm guilty of it all the time. You know, we always put ourselves second or say, oh, it's, you know, like how are there any communities or any programs, any initiatives that are helping African Americans, the BIPOC community, heal within themselves?
Cheryl, you're right on the money. And if I certainly was not talking about you, so please understand that. And we haven't even talked about what the Black community or people of color need to do to heal themselves. I mean, there's a lot of work to do there too. A lot of work to do there too. So the answer is yes, there are some great people who are doing great things to give Black America a new sense of itself, a new sense of its own power. I mean, there are extraordinary individuals who are leading. I'm thinking of Reverend Barber as a wonderful example of that. So there are great people who are doing that. So there are just so many fronts where this has to be worked on. So it simply is one of them. Anyway, I'll stop there. But the point is that this is a multi-level project, and I think white folk have a particular responsibility, but I also think that Black people have a very specific responsibility of changing the lens that they see everything through as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think Eileen had her hand up first, Stuart.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I just wanted to speak to what you just said, Mr. Strong, and also before, you know, I'm a social worker and I worked at the county for my a whole adult life at mental health. And this is how being on this committee and the rise of my own growth and awareness about, you know, just being in the world as a white person was so amazing to me because, you know, we didn't have a lot of social workers and therapists of color in the Department of Mental Health. And, I could never understand that. Of course, the clients that we treated were the majority white also. And I worked mostly in a substance abuse unit, a late stage substance abuse unit. And, I spent a certain amount of time kind of blaming the internal department for not doing outreach, to hire people of color. And then fast forward to this police committee, and one of our subcommittees was to take a look at hiring. And a couple of our members did like an exceptional job of trying to work with um, civil service to see about how to alter the testing situation to invite and more people to join the police department. And my own opinion about it at first was, that they shouldn't change anything because it's the only way to get a promotion in the county. You had to take a test. And then I listened to the the Ulster County police reform one night, and Juan Figueroa spoke about some of the things I've been, studying for my license now, called structural racism. And, just over the last year or two, that's language that's new to me. And, he said that, the way the system is set up, it doesn't, really invite people who are not so sure about being included or invited to go through that test situation, so there needs to be some changes made there. And I guess he hired someone, outside the civil service system to, in a particular position. I don't know if it was in a PR position or whatever, but that was sort of like a one way that he changed the civil service system. And it was like a light bulb went off for me. And after all the years in the county system, which I am grateful for, because I have a pension and, I had wonderful opportunities. It never occurred to me that there could be like a structural racist system that would, not invite like more BIPOC to our work. So if I'm waking up, in the last 2 years, and I don't say it like, well, if I'm waking up, I'm just saying that I've been blessed with the opportunity to see a little bit more through my work. It is a big job to, begin to talk about and look at these things without feeling shame. Or, with trying to be kind and have compassion. And it takes some leadership. For instance, I would say, just the way you're engaging everyone on this panel right now, no one feels defensive, no one feels challenged by you. We feel like we're learning something. And you just never know when that light bulb is going to go off, I guess, is what I want to say.
Yeah, no, I thank you. Thank you, Eileen. I think it's true. I was, there was this great piece that talked about we cannot live in America and not have been exposed to some component of racism. It's impossible. So that to think that we have engaged in some level of racist behavior doesn't make us bad people. It just means that it's the system that we have been brought up in. And just like for you, Eileen, what happened is that as it becomes more and more clear to us about where that system has taken us and that we can change course, all the better. But we've been breathing the same air all our lives, and this is the mother's milk, for good or for ill, But this is the mother's milk that we've all been brought up on. And now we've got to
Mhm.
really understand how to extricate ourselves from that. And this
Thank
is
you.
a long-term process.
Yeah, you got
Marlene,
Actually,
you
Stuart's
were kind
next.
enough to lift your electronic hand, so please go for
I
it.
know, but Stuart was before me, so I don't want to
Oh,
cut
okay.
the line.
Quick one. Maybe there could be a, a sort of a town meeting. For instance, one of the big crises facing police recently was the incident in the Buffalo Wings parking lot. And one side seemed to see this woman being victimized, and another side saw all the complexities of police procedures, the necessity to enforce laws, et cetera, et cetera. And both sides didn't get any closure. They didn't say, oh, now we understand what's with the other side. And if, when there are these crisis flashpoints, if thereafter there could be a open discussion instead of these damn sound bites and chum in the water headlines in the Freeman, but where a say on one side a Black community member could present the situation of the young woman, and somebody on the other side could uh, explain the the uh, the rules and regulations and constraints and dedication of the police, and how, okay, the town of Ulster guy tried to de-escalate it, but the sheriff's guy was at his wit's end, losing control. And if there's one thing cops don't like, it's losing control. If those things could be brought forth and resolved, instead of there just being until the next time and the next blow up, so that the community would understand both sides, and one side could better understand the other.
Yeah. Stuart, I think that yes, and I think that it goes back to what we were saying earlier. And that is that if everybody doesn't understand
Yeah,
what the vision of the police department is, in other words, to
right,
say, this is what we're going to do as a police department.
right.
If it's control, if it's we're going to be de-escalating or whatever it is, because right now there is no basis for determining who's making sense. Whether the citizen is making sense because they were roughed up in a way that they didn't appreciate, or whether the police is doing it, saying, I was going by the book, I was following
Yeah.
procedure. But if there isn't a common understanding of how and what the police will do, then all we're going to do is talk past each other. Because
And what they're there for.
exactly. Is it my
Because
job? And
because right now there was never any closure over the Buffalo Wing.
my guess is
People.
that there never will be.
Exactly. And
There
there
never will
should
be.
be. This should be drug out into the light and really looked at it, so that it isn't just, oh, this is bad, or whatever.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you. But until the police department and the town of Ulster issues a manifesto that says, this is what the Ulster Police Department is about. This is what we will do. This is what we won't do. And you can shoot at it, but everybody's clear about what the police department is there to do.
But what I'm saying is this would be in a public arena discussion of that, so that in the elements of the situation, what went down could be explained to explicate how the police mean to be and how this person felt, and maybe get some closure. You can make all the mission statements you want, and if you're lucky, you can actually have that esprit, that vision embodied in the actions of the police department. But it doesn't matter if there isn't a discussion and an understanding in the public arena, so that
Chief, how do you feel about that?
Well, I think obviously that topic came up kind of late in
yeah,
this committee, but obviously it was it was very vivid in everybody's mind because it did happen in the town. And like you said, I don't think anybody will ever have the understanding about what happened that day. Mr. Dean was correct there. Obviously Facebook commented. People had their one side of their version of it, that she should have just complied with the officer and nothing would have happened. The other version is the officer should have de-escalated it better. But I think it's still going to go back to the fact, unless we understand each other and understand what was entailed there. I think you said it correctly. It's both the society has to buy in just as much as police have to.
yep,
They're just as much as responsible for this system being failed, and it's a system. It's an entire system, not just law enforcement as we've been singled out in this order. But it's a system of why is there a breakdown of communication?
Yeah.
Why the, and where are we going to do to improve it?
There
The
you
police
go.
could reform all they want, but if society is still a bias against police, and we know, being in law enforcement, there's a bias against blue. People are necessarily, even if they didn't have a bad experience, they're naturally, of what they've been told is that police are bad and don't trust them. And that's a bias. I mean, that's a bias automatically towards law enforcement. So that's something we're still trying to overcome. But I don't know the ultimate answer for it. I mean, I know ultimately we got to continue to work towards the end result. I mean, and like you said, unless society understands what Ulster Police Department is about, A, B, C, and D, and this is what we're going to achieve. There's ultimately, people need to see it. They need to see what you're going to do. And visual learners, or whatever you want to say, people need to see it physically in black and white to understand what you're going to do and what you're going to provide.
Mhm. Great. Thank you. Marlene, I think you get the last question tonight.
Well, I just wanted to echo what Kyle is saying, what the chief is saying, also just in terms of, being visual. Unfortunately, when you have, as Stuart comments on the Daily Freeman, they don't represent the way that it should be represented. So I'm still a little tight about the way I was represented by my interview with the Freeman and what came out of that article, because that wasn't even remotely what I talked about with our dedication to this committee and all the work that we did. All that reporter took away was in my opinion, reading through it, negative comment where I said, I don't know how Shayna Shaw felt. I'm not a Black woman. And that's all the reporter took from that. I mean, I was on the phone with him for over an hour that night. So that's always very disturbing to me, because, I said it kind of candidly at the end, like, dude, I don't know what she was feeling. I'm not a Black woman. I wasn't in that situation. So I took that away. But what I think about when I'm listening to your words, and thank you so much for speaking with us tonight, is that I'm always reminded of it's not an incident, but maybe a moment when I was with my daughter, who's much older now, but she was in preschool and she had a little friend that was a little Black girl and had invited her to a birthday party. And my daughter was just so excited about this birthday party and wanted to go because it was in an apartment. She'd never seen an apartment before. So there was all this hype about going to this birthday party. So I'm Googling the directions on MapQuest. That's how long ago this was. And it's taking me through a neighborhood in Kingston. And I'm feeling my own bias. Like, oh my God, I'm driving my daughter to this birthday. Like, where are we going? Like, I've never been over in that part of town. And I realized in that moment, my daughter knew none of this. All she knew was that she was going to a birthday party with her friend from preschool and that she was going to a party in an apartment building. And she had never experienced that before. And I think about all of our work that we're doing in our conversations, but how so much of this bias starts with children at a very young age and then just continues to escalate to the point that it's never truly addressed. And it erupts in these types of episodes where we read about the Black Lives Matter and why we're doing this work that we're doing with police reform.
Yeah. Marlene, you reminded me of a piece that was done for our report. It was called the Black Doll Test. Do you know about it?
I do.
And it was repeated in 2015.
Okay.
It was first done in the 40s and 50s.
Yep.
And then repeated in 2015. And the percentage of children who called the white doll prettier, smarter, and
Yep.
friendlier versus the black doll who was uglier, meaner, and dumber was almost the same.
Yeah.
So it really, and we use that to cite how pervasive systemic racism is and how young it starts. These were 12 to 7-year-old children.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who really, just by virtue of living in the air that we're living in, had come to that conclusion at such an early age. That's what we're working against. That's the work we've got to do.
My daughter was 4 in the preschool when she went to, and just so excited. And I still get a little emotional about it. I'm like, she doesn't know any of this. Like she just knows she's going to a birthday party.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, everybody, thank you so much for tonight. This has been you've really helped me just get clarity about any number of things. And I'm so grateful for the conversation that we had tonight. Wayne, thank you for inviting me. Chief, thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. I don't know that we solved anything tonight, but it was great having the conversation with you. And I really want to just thank you for the work that you're doing, because this is the work that it's going to take for us to really get to a better place as a community. And I'm grateful to be in this work with you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And you.
Thank you, Lester.
Yes.
Yeah, Lester, I feel like you took it to a little different level for us, brought some real a spirit to it. So thank you so much.
Okay. And
All
I just
right.
want to say thanks to everybody also. And Lester, it's a pleasure to meet you, sir.
Great
And
to meet you.
look forward to the opportunities we have to work together as we move forward on this endeavor.
Absolutely.
Likewise. Likewise.
All
All
right.
right.
Thank
So
you
good
so
night,
much.
everyone. Good
Good
night.
night.
everyone.
Night.
Hi, team.
Good night.
Night all.
Good night, team.